Welcome, Dr. Epic here, and in this lecture we're going to learn about a big rock, the adventures of Squanto, turkey dinners, and Good Time Charlie, the King of England. We're going to follow that outline right up there as we learn all about the creation of the Puritan New World. Now, our story picks up in late 1620, where a group of Puritan separatists are crossing the Atlantic in a single overloaded boat called the Mayflower. And their goal is to land in the New World and to create a community of the elect. They had made an agreement with a group of investors called the Merchant Adventurers to place a colony at the mouth of the Hudson River, which is there, all right? But that's not where they go. They actually land north of there at a place called Patuxent, which is there. Now, William Bradford writes that this is an error in navigation. They went too far north in their navigation and they landed in the wrong place. And they landed so late in the year that they basically had to disembark as quickly as possible. Most modern historians do not actually believe William Bradford. Most historians think that this accident was quite intentional, that they intentionally landed north of where they were supposed to go. And the reason behind this is that there is a line, there's a parallel, that is the northernmost border of the royal colony of Virginia. That line is where the authority of the royal governor down in Jamestown ends. So a group of people who want to separate themselves from the Church of England and distance themselves from the King of England just accidentally land north of the line of control of Virginia's royal governor. It's almost certainly not an accident. They landed there on purpose to get away from royal authority. They land on December 21st, 1620, 4 days before Christmas. They settle on the inlet of Plymouth, landing next to a great rock. Now, they don't place any special importance to this rock. It's later generations that will name that rock Plymouth Rock, and it will kind of loom large in the mythology of our country. And people over the centuries will break off different parts of the rock for souvenirs, which is why if you go to Plymouth today, like the actual Plymouth Rock is actually it's actually pretty small. At any rate, they land 4 days before Christmas, which is kind of ironic. Because Puritans didn't celebrate Christmas. They thought it was some horrible pagan leftover from the Roman Empire, which it kind of is. Anyway, 102 people landed, 74 men and 28 women. Its entire families land at Plymouth. And this is probably one of the reasons that Plymouth doesn't have as rough a time of it as Jamestown. Jamestown, the first wave of settlers was all men. But at Plymouth, entire families land. They land on a snow-covered land because they landed really late in the year. But they do find a pretty good place to settle. From its high placement and its fresh water supply, they occupy the ruins of an Indian village called Patuxent, where virtually all of the natives had recently died as a result of epidemic disease, which is probably either smallpox or cholera. So this wave of disease had come through probably around 1614, 1615, 1616. And it had killed virtually everyone in Patuxent, but it had left this great spot unoccupied. So the Puritans move into this area. There's the ruins of Indian houses. There's a freshwater stream that goes through the middle of the village. There's a large hill at one side that would be perfect to put a lookout post on. There's even cornfields that have been cut for the forest, ready to plant. And there's a large beach where you can just drive boats right up onto the settlement. This place looks absolutely great, and it's called Patuxent. And they take up occupation in Patuxent. The Mayflower unloads and sails away, leaving them alone. Now, that first winter of 1620, 1621 is exceedingly difficult. It's far too late in the year to plant anything, so they've got to get by on the food resources that they actually had. And those food stores run very, very low. And almost half of the colonists die in that first winter from privation and sickness. And among one of the people that does die is William Bradford's wife. She falls into Plymouth Bay and freezes to death. And there is a historical argument that claims that she was one of a number of suicides, people that killed themselves from privation. And the Puritans kind of smoothed that over in the historical record. The only thing that really gets them through this winter is that while they're digging into the ruins of Patuxent to build their houses, to build the foundations of their houses, they come across all this stored Indian corn that the old inhabitants of Patuxent had buried corn to get them through the winter. And it's that corn that they discover in the ground. And eating that corn enables them to survive that first horrible winter at all. They had actually hoped to trade with the local Native Americans. But every time they actually see the Native Americans run away from them. Because, as we'll find out, the Native Americans have been told to not talk to the English. So only the discovery of that stored Indian corn in the ruins of Patuxet keeps the colony alive through 1621. But basically by March, they've actually eaten their way through that. And they've eaten their seed corn as well. So they actually have nothing to plant in April, May, which means they're going to starve to death at the end of summer. Things are looking very, very grim for the Plymouth colony. The colony was facing spring without anything to plant. And this is when they make contact with the local Native Americans. Enter the Wampanoag, also called the Pokanoket. The Wampanoag, led by their sachem, their chief, a man named Massasoit, comes out of the woods. And he brings people with him that can actually speak English, or English to a certain level of extent. And he basically wants to make an alliance with the Puritans at Plymouth. He wants them to be able to supply him advanced English tools, beads, copper, iron tools, and in particular flintlock guns, to help him. To help with his own rivals, the Narragansett Pequod and the Mohegan. So the question is that why does Massasoit make the decision to help the Puritans? And he does help them. He gives them food. He gives them enough supplies to get through the summer. He gives them corn. He gives them the Three Sisters to plant in the spring so that they have something in the summer. And he gives them basically a tutor, somebody to help them along, who we'll meet in just a tick. But basically, why does Massasoit make the decision to help the Puritans? And it has to do with current politics in the shatter zone along New England and southern New England. And this is kind of a complicated situation, so I'm going to try to explain it in very, very simple terms. And it has to do with the three really big Indian nations of southern New England. The Wampanoag, the Narragansett, and the Mohegans. And there's the map right there. The Wampanoag are there, the Narragansetts are there, and the Mohegans are there. Okay. Now you see, each of these tribes was quite large, and all of them were enemies of each other. Particularly the Wampanoag and the Narragansetts were bitter rivals. The strongest tribe in the area is the Narragansetts. They are by far the most powerful tribe. But the problem is that the Narragansetts are not so strong that they can beat both the Wampanoag to their east and the Mohegans to their west. And so if a big war did brew up in southern New England, the Narragansetts know that both of these other nations could team together and beat them. So there's this very delicate balance of power going on among the Indian nations in southern New England. And that wave of infection of smallpox and cholera that had come through around 1615 had actually upset this careful balance between these three rival Native American nations. Because you see, the Narragansetts hadn't been hit by that wave of epidemics at all, whereas the Wampanoags got cut in half, and the poor Patuxets were almost completely eliminated. So Massasoit has basically, over the last few years, been carefully hiding how weak the Wampanoag really are. And then, when the English show up at Plymouth, he's like, ooh, let's see if these guys survive a winter first, and then we're going to make contact with them. Which is why he tells all of these Native Americans to not talk to the English until he gives permission. So, we've got the balance of these three nations. And what Massasoit hopes is to use the alliance with the English at Plymouth to elevate the Wampanoag above their rivals, the Narragansetts and the Mohegans. So, Massasoit gives them corn to get through the summer. He gives them seeds to plant throughout the spring and into the summer. And he asks the last surviving Patuxet Indian to help the Puritans through the planting and the harvest. Now, this guy's name is Squanto, but he goes down in the history books and he's more popularly known simply as Squanto. Now, Squanto becomes basically the best friend the Puritans ever had in New England. And it has to do with the particularly weird adventures of Squanto. Because you see, Squanto has traveled the world. What happened is that around 1610, Squanto and a number of friends were fishing off the coast of New England, and they were captured in a slave raid, either launched by an English or a Spanish ship. Now, the traditional telling of the story says that it was an English ship that captured him, but that has been historically challenged in recent years. And the reality is that we really actually don't know who captured Squanto. But we do know what happened next. They captured Squanto, they sailed down to the Caribbean. They take Squanto to the Caribbean, where he is sold as a slave on one of those horrible sugarcane plantations, down in the West Indies. He's on the sugarcane plantations. He learns Spanish. He learns to read and write Spanish. He impresses, his owners, and they decide to take him from the Caribbean across the Atlantic to Spain, to show him off as a curiosity. So Squanto makes it to Spain. There's in Spain, he escapes, makes his way across Europe, ends up in southern England, ends up in London, where he works on the docks. There he learns English, and he lives in London for quite a few years. And then he realizes that there's a ship leaving for the New World, leaving for Canada. He gets assigned on that ship. The ship crosses the Atlantic again. He jumps ship. He escapes from that ship, ends up in, I think, Nova Scotia with another Englishman. There, him and his English friend build a boat, and sometime around 1617, they sail down the coast to make it back to his home. So basically, Squanto is captured in 1610 and spends the next 7 years traveling in a huge circle all the way around the Atlantic. He makes it back to his home of Patuxet in 1617, where he finds the entire Patuxet nation has died. They were all wiped out by that wave of smallpox and cholera around 1615. Everyone he knows is dead. Squanto is the last of the Patuxet. He decides that he's going to go live with the allies of the Patuxet. He goes and lives with the Wampanoags. Even though he doesn't like Massasoit, and Massasoit really doesn't like Squanto. They never like each other. He's got to be on pins and needles when he's around Massasoit. But Massasoit doesn't particularly like Squanto and doesn't want Squanto hanging out with the Wampanoag. So he says, hey, Squanto, this used to be your old village anyway, so why don't you help the English? And Squanto agrees. And in my mind, this is how the encounter goes. Like, Squanto steps forward and the Puritans step forward, and they look at this like Native American dude, and they're like, we are the English. We cross big water to come to new land. And then Squanto says in perfect English, yeah, I totally know that. I lived in London for like 3 years. Don't worry about it. Because Squanto speaks perfect English. At any rate, the orphan Squanto basically completely adopts the new inhabitants of Patuxet. After all, the Puritans are living in his own home. And he basically teaches them how to do everything. Anything they don't know, he teaches them how to do it. He teaches them how to fish in the shallows of Plymouth Bay. He teaches them how to catch eels. Apparently the trick is feeling them with your feet during low tide. He teaches them how to bait and hunt deer. He teaches them how to plant the three sisters, corns, beans, squash. He teaches them how to dig for clams. He teaches them how to use basically fish guts to fertilize the corn. He shows them which woods you can hunt and which woods you can't hunt in. Because remember, for the Eastern Woodlands nations, hunting privileges are very, very important. In short, Squanto shows them how to live, hunt, and farm in this land that they are calling New England. Squanto shows them how to do everything. And the resulting harvest is so rich and so bountiful that the Separatists and Puritans invite the Wampanoags and they invite Massasoit to a great harvest feast to be held in November of 1621. And you know exactly where I'm going. This is literally the first Thanksgiving. It really happened. Okay. You really had the Wampanoags, you had Squanto, you had William Bradford, you had the Puritans, and they really did have a big feast. Now, it was a Thanksgiving feast, not like you or I would imagine it. Basically, they did have, we don't know if they had turkeys. We know that William Bradford mentions that they went fowling, which is they went hunting for birds, and they got a number of birds. So it was probably a mix of turkeys and duck. It was almost certainly accompanied by succotash, which is when you cook the three sisters together, and probably some shellfish, maybe an eel or two. Eels. But yeah, they meet the first Thanksgiving. It's the first Thanksgiving. And to make it even more Thanksgiving-y, they have to, because Massasoit and Squanto don't like one another, they have to put them on like opposite sides of the Thanksgiving meal. Just like everyone else's Thanksgiving. You have the two relatives you can't put next to one another. Now, this is a one-off event. It doesn't start the American tradition of Thanksgiving. That comes much later. But it did really happen in November of 1621. They create the first Thanksgiving. And the really remarkable thing about that first Thanksgiving is that these friendships that are created in 1621 last the rest of these men's life. William Bradford and Massasoit in particular become very close friends and allies. And the Puritans in Plymouth and the Wampanoag Nation become very close allies for more than 2 generations. There's almost 50 years of peace after this first Thanksgiving. You don't have anything like that down in Virginia. Plymouth and the Wampanoags in New England don't have any of the sort of touchy, on-again, off-again warfare and violence that you saw with Jamestown and the Powhatan. Now, this is not to say that everything is like completely peaceful, because the Wampanoag do have rivals in the area. And the Plymouth and the Wampanoag become military allies. They like attack the Wampanoag's Indian enemies together. Together, the Wampanoag and the Puritans launch raids against the Narragansetts. They launch raids against the Massachusetts nations. They fight a very nasty war called the Pequod War, which gets very important in the next lecture. And the Puritans are led by, the Puritan military forces are led by a really ruthless war captain, a guy called Miles Standish. And the Native Americans begin to get a taste of the devastating effects of European guns. In particular, the English flintlock muskets are absolutely devastating. And the Wampanoag start to buy flintlocks from the English in large quantities. And when I say Miles Standish is like really ruthless, Miles Standish is really ruthless. There's this one instant where he meets with these Massachusetts Indians, and there's a Massachusetts warrior there that starts making fun of Miles Standish's height, because Miles Standish is only like 5'3", 5'4". He's like a little bitty dude. And this Native American warrior pulls out this knife that he got the French to make him, and it's this super sharp knife with all of this intricate carving on the handle. And he starts mentioning how sharp this knife is and how he's going to use this knife to kill many English. And Miles Standish goes, "Can I see that knife for a second?" And the Indian guy hands him the knife, and then Miles Standish goes, "Huh," and buries it in the guy's heart, kills the dude with his own knife. Ruthless guy. And Massasoit's plan actually works. Together with their English allies, the Wampanoag rapidly become the largest and strongest nation in all of New England. They just become larger and bigger and stronger with each passing year. Even their old enemies, the Narragansetts, are completely humbled by the rise of the Wampanoags. Massasoit himself becomes the most well-respected leader of all of the Native Americans of New England. And Squanto prospers with the Puritans. He ends up living with the Puritans, not so much with the Wampanoags. Again, Massasoit and Squanto don't get along very well at all. And there's actually this one part where the Puritans like turn to Squanto, and they're like, we've gotten along for a while. Why don't, you don't have to live with us anymore. Why don't you go back, to your people? And apparently Squanto turned to them and said, "But you are my people. The disease took my people away, and then you came, and you are my people." And the Puritans were, this didn't really happen, but, I imagine it. The Puritans are like, "We love you too, Squanto." In fact, they love Squanto so much that like Squanto does all these things that the Puritans can't do. Like there's a boy that gets like lost in the woods, and Squanto goes like way out in New England to save him. And they really love Squanto. They love Squanto so much that at one point in time, Massasoit loses his temper with Squanto and basically tells the Puritans, kill this guy. He even sends them his own knife. He's like, here's a knife, take this knife and kill Squanto. And the Puritans won't do it. The Puritans absolutely refuse to hurt Squanto. Causes a bit of tension. Now, there is some kind of shenanigans, poorly understood shenanigans behind the scenes, that maybe Squanto is conspiring to overthrow Massasoit, but nobody really knows what's going on, and it's all basically like crazy rumors from the early 17th century. Squanto dies in 1622. He dies of what William Bradford calls Indian fever. And the leaders of Plymouth are deeply shaken at the death of their good friend Squanto. They have a funeral for him. They fire guns into the air in his honor. And finally, they come to a decision about Squanto. They're like, look, this is all the will of God. All right, we are just like characters in a book that God has already written. God wanted us to meet the investment bankers. God wanted us to cross on the Mayflower. God wanted us to settle here at Plymouth. God wanted us to meet Squanto. And that means Squanto was sent by the Almighty himself. And they pay Squanto the greatest compliment they can think of. They decide Squanto was a member of the elect the entire time. Squanto's going to heaven. So after we all die, we could just meet Squanto again. That's what they decide. And nobody knows where Squanto is buried to this day, but there is a marker that indicates where they did fire guns in his honor to honor their great friend Squanto. And Plymouth unlocks New England the same way that Jamestown unlocked the Chesapeake Bay region. And following Plymouth comes a wave of Puritan migration from England. And you can see that map there on the lower left. All of these new colonies began to spring up. New Haven, Connecticut, Boston, Portland, Exeter. This is part of a wave of Puritan migration that becomes known as the Great Migration. And it lasts about 20 years. Ship after ship after ship arriving in Plymouth, arriving in Boston Harbor, and weighing anchor and disgorging their contents onto the new American shore as these Puritans embrace the ability to build the community of the elect in New England. The largest of these fleets is called the Winthrop Fleet, and it's led by a guy named John Winthrop, and that's him right up there. And it is John Winthrop who builds the largest and most powerful of these Puritan New World colonies, because it is John Winthrop who builds Boston and who establishes the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, why are so many of these Puritans crossing the Atlantic to build this sort of community of the elect in the New World? And the answer is because very, very bad things are happening back in England. There is a great deal of contention throughout the 1630s as England is gripped by political, social, and religious fervor, as increasingly the reformer Puritans are coming into conflict with the king himself. And this eventually boils over into the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651. Now, remember that there's two groups of Puritans. You have the reformers and the separatists. The reformers want to fix England. The separatists want to leave it. It's the separatists who mostly end up in the New World. It's the reformers who fight the English Civil War. It's this horrific war. It lasts for 9 years. And basically, the warfare in the English Civil War is the Puritans who control Parliament fighting the king and his army of cavaliers, and they battle back and forth. The Puritans build their own army called the Roundheads, or the New Model Army. The English leads his cavaliers against them. They battle back and forth. The king is eventually defeated, and they try to reform him. He will not accept Protestant authority, and in 1649, King Charles I is executed. They cut his head off, and the Puritans win the English Civil War. They abolish the monarchy and establish the leader of the Puritans, a guy called Oliver Cromwell, as Lord Protector, and he rules over the Commonwealth of England from 1653 to 1658 for 5 years. This is Puritan England. This is the reformer Puritans' dream. They are going to fix the Kingdom of England. They are going to build the community of the elect in England, and this is what they proceed to do. Now, they do a lot of stuff that is quite popular. They build roads, they build bridges, they build schools, because of course you have to be literate if you want to communicate with God. But they also do a lot of things that are very unpopular, like kill the king. They ban the theater, they ban dancing, they ban Christmas, because there's no Christmas in Puritan England. They ban the theater, they ban public drinking, they ban blood sports, no bear baiting or dog fighting in Puritan England. They banned a lot of music and a lot of dancing. This is very unpopular, and the people most of the people in England are not actually Puritans, and they do not like Puritan England, but everyone is kind of scared of Oliver Cromwell. So they wait for him to die. Oliver Cromwell dies in 1658, and the army he built, the New Model Army, instead of upholding Puritan England, rebels against it because Puritan England is so unpopular. And they actually reach out to the executed king's son, King Charles II, and they invite him to return and overthrow Puritan England. And this is what he does. This is the restoration of 1660. The New Model Army invites Charles II to come back and be king. There's Charles II. And Charles II basically spends the next 20 years completely dismantling Puritan England. He keeps the things that are popular. He keeps the roads and the bridges and the orphanages and the schools. He keeps all of that. But he gets rid of the things that are unpopular. He brings back Christmas. Yay, we get to have Christmas. He brings back the theater. He brings back alcohol. He brings back dancing. And this is incredibly popular, except if you're a Puritan, in which you totally hate all of this. And the Puritans are just absolutely aghast at what happens in England as they watch as this king just systematically takes that community of the elect that they attempted to build, and just piece by piece, he just dismantles the entire thing. And they grow to hate Charles II. They hate Charles II so much. And what makes it even worse is the fact that Charles II himself is not a religious person at all. In fact, he's pretty much just a libertine. He likes to drink, he likes to smoke, he likes to gamble, he likes to go to the theaters. In fact, it's Charles II who lifts the ban on women acting in the theater. Charles II goes to see Shakespeare, and he says, why do we have male actors playing female roles? And they say, well, women are banned from the stage. And Charles goes, no, that's stupid. That's stupid. Let's let women play women. Everyone is just totally aghast. Because you see, Charles, he becomes Good Time Charlie. That's my nickname for him. So this is Good Time Charlie. Good Time Charlie likes to have a good time. He is not especially religious. He's not really into God. He doesn't really read the Bible. He likes to wear colors. He likes to drink. He's got a wife. He's got about somewhere between 6 or 7 official mistresses. And in addition to those, he sleeps with dozens and dozens of people. And most of them are even women. So Good Time Charlie is just having a good time. He's all about having a good time. Drinking, smoking, going to the theater, celebrating Christmas, getting drunk at the pub. Good Time Charlie is there. If you want to watch 2 bears rip each other to pieces or a group of dogs fight in the streets, Good Time Charlie is like, go to it, have a ton of fun. In fact, I'll be there right there with you. If you want to dice in a back alley, you look over and there's the freaking King of England right next to you. All of that is fine with Good Time Charlie. Good Time Charlie is into having a good time, and he wants England to have a good time with him. Oh, the Puritans hate this so much. They hate Good Time Charlie. They hate Charles II so much. And to rub it in, to just rub salt in the wound, Good Time Charlie, Charles II, is a really good king. He's very fair. He's very balanced. He could have taken revenge on the people that executed his father, but he doesn't at all. In fact, during the Restoration, he only orders something like 4 executions. And those are like really hardcore opponents that will not accept him as king. He doesn't even want to execute those guys. He doesn't take revenge on any of the people that like destroyed half his family and executed his father. England prospers wildly during this time. He fixes many of the problems that are in England. In fact, Charles II fixes so many of England's problems that it actually negatively impacts the number of people coming to the New World, coming to America. It actually changes American history. And in fact, Charles II has gone down in English history as like one of their greatest kings. He just happened to like to live. He liked to drink. He liked to smoke. He liked to have fun in other ways. It's Good Time Charlie. And the Puritans hate him so much. Because with Good Time Charlie, the idea of building a community of the elect in England, the idea of reforming England into the community of the elect, that dream is dead. Dream is dead. Puritan England has failed, all right? But while Puritan England failed, the Puritans still have a better England, a new England. And all of the Puritans who don't want to live with Good Time Charlie, again, start coming over in large numbers. They have a Puritan New England, and the separatists say, we were right the whole time, all right? It is not the plan to reform Old England to make a Puritan England. We are going to make a Puritan New England. And together with our Wampanoag allies, we are going to build the community of the elect in America. And that's kind of what they do. And it even works for a while. It works for a while. Now, you have all the information you need to answer that question right there. Why did so many colonies fail? You should know that. What factors enabled Jamestown and Plymouth to succeed? You should have a pretty good idea about that. Describe the origin of these 2 colonies and their challenges. Explain their success. And finally, what were the implications of that success? An answer to that question, to these questions, should be bubbling in your brain, and it should be coming together because you have all of the pieces to solve that puzzle. This brings us to the end. The Puritan New World has been created. Jamestown is a success and has unlocked Virginia. It's unlocked Chesapeake Bay. The English colonies have succeeded in the New World. Now we're going to talk about what happens after that point, but we'll do that next time. And I will see you there. If you're interested in like reading about Plymouth, in reading about the Puritan colonies, these are the main texts I used to prepare this lecture. All of them are really quite good. And they range from like archaeology to popular narratives to primary sources to, serious academic texts. And they're all really quite good. Nick Bunker's Making Haste from Babylon is like a really good book. It is a big, thick, serious academic history. It's a big, thick book. And it really spends like the first third of the book doing nothing but talking about theology. They don't even reach Plymouth until like page 500. It really digs deep into like where the Pilgrims and where they came from. There's Nathan Philbrick's much more popular Mayflower, Voyage, Community, and War. It's pretty good. Now Philbrick is not a serious historian. He's more of a storyteller who specializes in history, and it is a really good history. It kind of skips over a few of the historical debates, but it is a fairly good history that details basically almost the first 70 or 80 years of the Puritan colonies. There's William Bradford's primary source of Plymouth Plantation. It's quite readable. William Bradford was better educated than John Smith, and it isn't quite written in so fanciful a language as John Smith uses. There's the archaeology of the Plymouth colony and the archaeology of these early English settlers in the James Dietz book right up there. That's quite good, talking about what they brought with them. And again, it's kind of interesting to look at these artifacts from the early days of Plymouth colony and be like, wow, like Squanto actually might have even looked at this one object, or, you know, this key or this, you know, knife might have been held by William Bradford. It's just absolutely incredible. If you really want kind of a Native American perspective on the events of Puritan New England, there's David Silverman's, you know, kind of angry book, This Land is Their Land. And if you can get past his obvious bias, it is quite a good book. And he really does give this really interesting Native American perspective, or has reconstructed a Native American perspective on the events in the early 17th century. And John Winthrop himself is right there talking about the Puritan dilemma, that like, how exactly do you build the community of the elect? How do you enforce religious orthodoxy, you know, without secular authority while maintaining your Christian values in this kind of idea, in this world where you have, you know, you don't think you actually have free will? It's a really interesting book. It digs deep into the theology, because again, you can't understand William Bradford or John Winthrop or Miles Standish or any of these Puritans without kind of wrapping your head around this idea that they don't really think they make any of their own decisions. They're just following the rule. They're following the roles written for them by God. But at any rate, if you're interested in this stuff, you can get these books. If you would know anybody who's like really into like early American history, here you can get them these books. They're very interesting. And you can actually use them if you want to kind of put together your answer about why Jamestown and Plymouth succeeded while so many other colonies failed. And I'll even give you a hint about that. The colonies succeeded because they didn't really do it on their own. They had help. Man, Massasoit is jacked. Massasoit works out. Look at the abs on Massasoit. He does sit-ups. Massasoit has done all the sit-ups. That's why I don't do sit-ups, because Massasoit did them all. He didn't leave any for me.